Welcome back. So as I mentioned in the last lesson, we have to use RxJS, or we're going to use RxJS in our application. But RxJS is a huge library. It can do so many things. Just to kind of give you guys, there's so much you can do in here. Now we're not going to do all of it. We're just going to focus on Angular RxJS library right here, which is, if you go under again, docs, fundamentals, RxJS, there's a bit of information about how we use observables in Angular, and I think that's the most important thing. And we are even going to go even into an even less open environment, because we only want to focus right now on the HTTP request and what we can actually do with HTTP client and observables. And that is actually limiting it quite a bit. But let's just stay there for now, because there's a lot you can do with these observables. And let's just start out by focusing about how do we actually use observables to make this request right here and send that request to get some data from a backend somewhere. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if we jump back to our application, I want to list all my customers. That was the goal. And I already went in and I set up this HTTP request right here where I say, get me the HTTP client and do a GET request. But what does that actually return to me? Does it actually return the list of customers? And the answer is no. This is just preparing and creating the actual HTTP request itself. So this is just setting up how should my actual request look, right? So this is kind of like going into Postman, if we're to use that reference. So if I go into Postman right here, I've explained now that I'm going to do a GET request. It's going to be to this URL. It's going to have a content type, but I didn't press the send button yet, right? So I just prepared all of this without clicking the send yet. That's where the point I'm at right now with this part right here. Now, what is it actually going to return to me? It's actually going to return what we call an observable, what I just tried to explain last lesson. So if we jump into the GET, I can just actually click this, Control or Command click it, and you can actually see the actual code behind the scene. And what I want you to notice right here is the return type. So if we go down, this is the method right here, the colon, and then the actual return type. That is what we call an observable. And that pretty much means that this is setting up for making an asynchronous call. Yeah, we want to do the same thing. So what I want to do is, inside my customer service, instead of returning a list of customers, I'm actually going to return an observable that contains a list of customers, right? So an observable is generic, so we'll do it like this. So that's why I put in lower than, bigger than. That's actually because it's a generic, the observable, and I wanted to return a list of customers in the end. Now that means this guy is not valid anymore, because this guy is returning an array, not an observable, right? This is an array. I don't want to return an array anymore. I actually want to return an observable with a list of customers. Let's just get rid of this and instead return this guy. Okay, so now I'm returning in my code an observable, which is again just preparing. If I go back to Postman, I'm returning this part of the Postman where I say I want to be able to actually get a list of customers, and I want to explain that it's JSON, but I haven't again pressed the send button yet, right? The code here only represents preparing for asking or sending an HTTP request. How do I actually execute it? Well, right now you'll see I get an exception in the customer list. So let's just jump to the customer list component to kind of execute this, because in the customer list component, that's where we actually make this request, right? So notice right here, I'm doing the get customers right here. And since I'm not returning just a list of customers anymore, you'll notice that I'm getting actually an exception now, because you're returning an observable with a list of customers inside it, and that's not a list of customers. How do we fix this? Well, I can actually just, let's just get rid of this. I can subscribe and say, I want to send the request, and when you're done, I want you to return some customers for me. Let's just call this, right here, let's just call this list of customers. That's what we're going to return. And it's just a lambda expression like we've used before. So let's just do other than like this. And then what we're going to get back right here is actually, when I'm done, this is going to be a list of customers. So I'm going to say this customers equal, and then the list of customers that I just got back. And I know this looks so crazy. I know this is so strange. So let me just try and explain it once more. What I'm doing right here is, first of all, I'm going in and I'm asking to create, not execute, but create a HTTP request. I'm setting it up right here. So this is how I want my HTTP request to look. I want it to be a GET request. I want it to go to this URL right here. And I want it to convert whatever I'm getting back as JSON into a list of customers. Again, I'm not executing it yet, but I'm preparing it. And behind the scenes, what the HTTP client actually does for me is also add content type application JSON. So it's just a header. So all that is setting up for me just by making this simple request right here. But to actually, again, execute it, to kind of trigger the event that I want to now execute this command, in my case, I'm calling inside my customer list component, I'm calling the subscribe function on that observable. So as soon as I do the subscribe, it's the same thing as if I was to press the send button in Postman. That's what the subscribe does for me, right? And I'm getting back right here is the asynchronous call returning to me the list of customers. Pretty much meaning that when I'm pressing send, notice there's a small delay, and when it's done, small delay, when it's done, I actually get back the list of customers. And automatically behind the scenes, my framework right here, the observable, takes the JSON that I get back right here, converts it into an actual list of customers as a customer array, and passes it into this variable right here. Notice I didn't put it in next myself. That's something that the system put in there for me to explain this is the data you're getting back. I then take that data and I set it the local list of customers. This is the local list of customers equal to that list of customers. I know. Give it some time, try it out, and you'll understand it. Every time you try, you'll get a better and a better understanding about what's going on right here. So now that we set all of this up, let's see if it actually works, because that's actually even more fun if it actually works. Let's just try and jump into our code, and there we go. Notice right here we have now all the customers that I have on my crazy backend. It seemed I built a lot of crazy customers, but they're actually there. Sweet, so I'm actually getting data now from a real REST API in my case. Now let's just try for the fun of it to put in the debugger right here, just to kind of show you guys how this actually works right here. So I'll put in a debugger a few places, because I feel that this is very important to kind of get an understanding about how these requests actually work in the system. So going back and just checking this out. Now I've set up the debugger to hit these different breakpoints. And if you check out down here, the debugger now hit when I go to the page of customers, clicking this link right here, I actually hit the first debugger, which is ng on init in the component list right here. So that's the init goes in and calls my request to the backend, right? So let me just try and continue right here. The next thing that we get to is, of course, setting up the request. So first of all, we are in here. We said I want to init, and I'm going to hit this breakpoint. So I said continue. The next thing I'm doing is I'm calling this method right here. That means that I'm going down to the customer service and hitting this breakpoint. And that creates my HTTP request without executing it, right? So it creates the HTTP request without executing it. The next step I cannot show you, but what's going to happen is I'm going to execute the HTTP request right here. So when I continue now, I execute the request. A small delay will happen. It's almost instant. So a small delay happens right here. And there we actually go and hit this breakpoint, meaning that now I'm done retrieving the data for you. And you can set the data locally with this method right here, taking the data I returned, this is the data that's returned from the backend, and setting it to Angular's local property right here that I'm using inside my HTML to list the components. And automatically, as soon as Angular gets that data and sets it in here, it automatically refreshes the view because we have binding. So that's perfect. Everything seems to be running, and that's it for this lesson. Of course, we'll dive more into this in the next couple of lessons, but that should be all we had to do. Let's just get rid of the debuggers and just see this running again without all the debugging information. And there we go. So jumping away here, customer, there we go. And notice again, there's a small delay, and that's actually retrieving the data from the backend. I really encourage people to have kind of a small twirly while they wait to get the data, and let's look at that in the next lesson. See you next time.